Welcome back to the Papa Schro Knows podcast. We're here to talk some football and some MMA as well. Today on the podcast, going to kind of give my quarterback rankings heading into the 2024 season, as we're just about a week away now. A little week and some change here on a Monday afternoon as we get ready this Thursday night, last Thursday night without football. Just let that sink in for a minute. We got Chiefs versus Ravens a week from Thursday night to open up the NFL season for 2024. I know we are all very excited for that. Get to see Mahomes versus Jackson, a rematch from the AFC Championship game, of course. And we are going to get plenty more into that next week on the podcast, as hopefully everything goes how I want it to go. And we're going to have a couple guests on the podcast next week to talk about that. I might get a little bit more into that later, especially when I start breaking down these rankings. But first things first, I wanted to get into the UFC over the weekend. UFC Fight Night Cannonier versus Borralho, I think is how you say it. Really good card. I mean, from what I saw, honestly, I didn't watch everything. I did get to see bits and pieces of the co-main, a little bit of the main card as well. I think I missed like the three fights in the middle, really, but I was kind of blown away by a couple of performances, and Borralho was one of them that I was just absolutely blown away by. His performance, Jared Cannonier's performance as well. I mean, very tough, wily veteran you're going in there facing, and you know, Borralho really puts his flag down and, you know, stamps his marking in that middleweight division. Cannonier was number 5. Borralho, I think, was number 12 coming into the fight at 185. So maybe a new contender jumping in, I think, would be good for the middleweight division. I don't think there's a ton of contenders out there when you look at the landscape. I know last week we kind of talked about the middleweight division as well. You know, obviously mainly talking about the Izzy and Dricus fight. But I mean, that's only going to help the middleweight division. They've got some characters in there that I think will sell fights, and, you know, they need some more guys up there to push to the top. That's one thing I think about Izzy's title reign that makes it a little bit less impressive than it could have been with some of the names that he fought, and Costa kind of fell off there. Khamzat Chimaev, like, when is he actually going to fight, I think is a better question than is he going to get a title shot, or, you know, that kind of question. I think it's more of when is he going to fight. So the middleweight division, I think, really needed this in a big way to just kind of help with progressing the division as a whole. And we'll see. I'm not sure what the rankings look like outside of those guys. Obviously, you got Sean Strickland in the mix still. But as I said, Chimaev, Costa, I think, are two guys that are just, I don't know. You know, are they going to be able to get back to a title shot? Is Chimaev ever going to get to a title shot? I mean, it seems like he doesn't fight anymore. It seems like he fought 4 times in, a couple of months and during COVID, and kind of vanished after that. So, I don't know. Like I said, I think it's really good for the middleweight division. See where Borralho kind of goes next on his quest. Is, you know, he said he's coming for Dricus. He called out Dricus after the fight. I think it was great. I thought the call-out was good. I thought everything was, you know, solid with Borralho. I thought great performance, resiliency, you know, just showing his craft all together. You know, the jiu-jitsu that was on display, the stand-up that he had. I mean, he was really hitting Cannonier with some good shots. Those leg kicks, those calf kicks early. Those first 2 calf kicks, I didn't think that fight was going to go very far. And the fact that they went the distance, even with Borralho dropping him there towards at the end of the 5th round, you know, I just definitely wasn't sure exactly how Cannonier made it out of that. And that arm triangle he had, I know he didn't have it properly, and Cannonier kind of used the cage to defend it as well. And he never went out, but there's a lot of pressure. And, man, I can tell you from firsthand, that's not an easy choke, like, to get to maneuver around. You know, there's not a lot of space once somebody gets, locked on you pretty tight the way Borralho had Cannonier. Again, he wasn't able to get to the other side of Cannonier to finish that arm triangle, but just the pressure that he applied, I mean, you could tell just in Cannonier's face. I mean, I was joking with Ray, like, I was having flashbacks. I had a tournament way back when in the day where I was not a heavyweight, but grappled heavyweights, and I got caught in a similar position where it was like just fighting for my life to stay conscious, and like that's just what Jared Cannonier reminded me of, like the look in his eyes, like please just don't go to sleep. And Miragliotta checked I think at least twice on him to see if he was still conscious, and he was. He fought through it, got to the bell, and I mean you got to give it to him on that. I mean just you got to tip your cap to just the resiliency of Jared Cannonier. And I think they said he's 40 now. Like that's kind of wild to me when you think about it, but it just does kind of show the age some of these guys, once they get to this level and are able to get to that championship level. Sometimes it doesn't happen as quickly as like an Izzy or a Sugar Sean O'Malley, or guys like that became champions young, a Jon Jones. So the realization that Cannonier is 40 is kind of crazy to me. Once they said that just kind of surprised me. Co-main event of the evening, like I said, I didn't get to see a ton of it. I did see bits and pieces of it throughout the fight while it was live. Tabitha Ritchie walks away with a unanimous decision over, well, let me not get that incorrect because I don't know if it's unanimous actually. Doesn't say here. She gets a decision win either way over the other fight that I did see from the main card. Man, I'm gonna chop this up, even though like I know I knew how to pronounce his name at one time, but Edmund Shahabazyan versus Gerald Meerschaert. Boy, these UFC names, man, they get you every time. Gerald Meerschaert getting the win over Edmund in that fight. That was a very back and forth fight, and I didn't think Meerschaert had a shot at it. Watching the first round. Most of the second round, it seemed like Edmund just absolutely had him on the feet, and Meerschaert wasn't able to do too much in that fight for the most part. So he does end up getting the submission, very slick submission. Great job, and looking at those records is crazy. Meerschaert, 37-17 after the win. And, of course, I think he's most famously known for being knocked out by Khamzat Chimaev. Francis Marshall on the prelims. Now, these last two prelims I got to catch live start to finish, and they were absolute bangers. Like, the fight with Francis Marshall and Dennis Bazooka, probably butchering that one too. I need to listen more to the announcers obviously saying their names live during the fight. But Francis Marshall, I mean, like, the way he put Dennis down, I think it was in the second round, or maybe it was in the first round. I can't remember, but it was a barn burner of a fight, and he ended up getting the decision. Francis Marshall, so he took the fight short notice. Look for him to be better next time. Those are lightweights, so maybe a name to keep your eye on, Francis Marshall. One guy that I will say definitely keep your eye on is now 8-1 Zachary Reese at middleweight. Zachary Reese, the first fight that I did watch him fight was Julian Marquez, and that fight where he absolutely smoked him at 20 seconds. Quick kick to the body, which he came out and did the exact same thing to Jose Medina. He landed like 2 or 3 body kicks that I didn't understand how Medina was standing. And Medina, the way he, I don't think a lot of people enjoy the antics of a guy that is losing and taunting, right? I mean, you're getting waxed out there, and you're taunting the guy that is absolutely whooping you. Not a good look, but it worked for Medina because he drug him into a dogfight. And every moment that Zach Reese got out of, kind of sniping and, being smart and methodical with his approach, he was, really clean, in and out. Anytime Medina was able to draw him in to that to that just, kind of barn burner type of fight of just like, let's go, let's fight. He landed some big shots. Landed a big spinning back elbow at one point. Reese ended up going to the ground later on in the fight. I think it was the third round where he finally committed to the takedown and started, really getting some ground time. I might be wrong. There might have been some more ground control earlier in the fight in the second round. I don't think it went to the ground the first, just going off of memory. But, that dude hits hard. Zach Reese hits hard, and it showed. And Medina is tough. I mean, next level tough. They talked about his toughness, how he fought at light heavyweight on the Contender Series and was undersized. He looked undersized at middleweight, I thought. And I think it was Bisping that mentioned that possibly. That he looks undersized at middleweight too. I mean, he could definitely go down to 170. So we'll see if he continues to keep that contract, because he lost on the Contender Series. Still got the contract for being tough as nails. Comes out here, kind of does the same thing. You'd like to see more out of Medina. But at the same time, I do think, if he drops down one more, he might be a really tough out. But Zach Reese, I think, is going to be one of those next rising stars at middleweight. And he'll be in the position Borralho was in Saturday night just as soon, I think, because just the way before the fight he was 7-1 with 7 first-round finishes. I mean, the dude's a finisher. He goes out and, he should have finished Medina. I am shocked that Medina lasted. Watching that fight was like watching a car crash. You just could not look away because, somehow this dude was surviving and continuing to go on in the fight. It was very admirable, but I also get Bisping's point of we saw that already. We'd like to see more out of Medina, and we'll see if he gets another date in the UFC. He's now 11-4. But again, I think he needs to go down to 170. I think 170 would be perfect for him. And his body just kind of lines up for that more because, Zach Reese is a big middleweight. Most of these divisions, it seems like at this point, are just huge for the division. 10 to 15 years ago, some of these guys that you see that are just monsters in their division, would not have been there at all. Zach Reese would have been easily a light heavyweight 10 years ago. But now you just get some of these dudes that are just absolute monsters for their division. And Medina, 5-10 years ago, he could have lasted at middleweight. But I think in this day and age, you got to drop down to 170 pounds. If a dude like Jose Medina is going to compete. So good night of fights, though, I thought. I was entertained personally. See what the UFC has up next. I think it's the Burns card, and that will be September 7th. Gilbert Burns versus Sean Brady. Jessica Andrade is also on that card, so interesting look to that next card. Mixed in with some other names I don't know too well. UFC 306 is after that, September 14th. That obviously a huge card with being the Sphere event and being the UFC Noche event. That's, Sugar Sean O'Malley versus Merab Dvalishvili. That I've been waiting for that fight for a long time. We finally get Grasso Shevchenko 3 after coaching the Ultimate Fighter. Brian Ortega versus Diego Lopez. Of course, they were originally supposed to fight at 303, I believe. That's going to be an absolute terrific card, I think. So last but not least, I feel like I finally had to talk on it. I don't think I've really talked about it on the podcast or anything. Just more conversations me and Ray have had. But Jon Jones. I think it's finally time to talk about Jon Jones as he kind of got propelled back into the limelight this week with his tweets. Dana White then spoke on Jon Jones and his situation, I believe, on the press conference of the Contender Series on Tuesday. While I was out of town, it kind of became some big news last week. So I'm just going to read off Jon Jones' tweets, and I'm going to kind of get to my thoughts and opinions on this, because I think most of the MMA community, we all feel pretty solid on this, although there are some wild fans out there that are on the other side, just big Jon Jones fans, which, fair enough. Big Jon Jones fan, I get it. Let's see, which one? Well, it basically started with Jon Jones trolling Tom Aspinall. Tom Aspinall there was some type of footage that came out of wrestling training for Tom Aspinall. Jon Jones said, looks like Tom displaying that amazing UK wrestling, which I'm assuming, I think we all assume that's a big troll, because it's always been, obviously the UK has come leaps and bounds from where they were 10 to 15 years ago with wrestling, but that was always the knock on UK fighters. They couldn't wrestle, they couldn't defend the takedown. We all know these were the knocks on UK fighters back in the day, and so I think it's kind of like a little bit of a jab at Tom Aspinall, essentially. He goes on to say, my focus is on Stipe. He actually wrestled Division 1, best heavyweight of all time as of right now. Maybe Tom will go on and beat Stipe's record one day. Right now I'm focusing on GOAT things. So my initial reaction to that, I'll get into some of this. Jon Jones also further went on to say, I guess there was a video that resurfaced recently of me saying that after Stipe, Francis was the only fight I was interested in. That video was recorded well over a year ago. That was recorded before I got injured, before there was an interim champion crowned. I had already voiced that I was that I wasn't interested in any more randoms. Now magically I'm ducking a fight that's never been negotiated or discussed at any table that matters. LOL, I'm sick. I'm sticking to my plans. Jon Jones jumps for no one. How many belts does one need? How many times do I have to break my own record? He went on to say in another tweet, there are fighters literally all over the world that I can think of in the back of my mind. I can beat Jon Jones. That think in the back of their mind. There will be no statues of you. Go out and win more. Make your name greater. That is the only way you do it. Another tweet. I'm 37 years old now. I've kicked everyone's ass. My job is to go finish strong and make an amazing movie. Go join Tom Brady, Floyd Mayweather, and all the retired badasses. So, let's break this down in a few different ways. Because the first thing is, I have no problem with Jon Jones chasing GOAT things. I have no problems with Jon Jones fighting Stipe Miocic. And I don't think most of the MMA community does. What everyone has a problem with is Jon Jones is holding up an entire division. Which, historically, the most important division. Your heavyweight division. It's the most important division in boxing. It's been, at times, the most important division in MMA. I don't think, prolifically, the heavyweight division is, as big of a deal as some of the other divisions in the UFC and in MMA. But, heavyweight tickets, they're going to sell. You're holding the entire division up. You are holding up a whole nother person's career. Because at this point, in my mind, and I tweeted this out after Aspinall defended the belt, that's the heavyweight champ. If we want to have an interim champ, that's Jon Jones. There's no way in your right mind that you can call Jon Jones the undisputed heavyweight champion. First of all, he never beat a champion to become champion. And I mean, granted, neither is Tom Aspinall, but there was another clip of Dana White talking after the Contender Series, and that one I've watched a couple of times. I'm not going to get it back out or anything, but basically to the effect that they tried to make the Jon Jones fight. He essentially used the time to talk down Francis Ngannou, while during that time the tune was totally different. Jon Jones was ducking Francis Ngannou. I mean, that's coming from Dana White. He don't want to fight him. He said, I don't know what Jon Jones wants to do, but I'm not here to make people fight. They were arguing over money. Funny enough, Francis Ngannou then gets in the same turmoil with the UFC, squabbling over money, and all of a sudden Jon Jones is ready to fight. As soon as Francis Ngannou exits. Instead of Francis Ngannou, Ciryl Gane, we could have had Francis Ngannou, Jon Jones. And the best part of all of it is the fact that not only Jon Jones, but Dana White echoes the sentiment. The same thing that happened to Ciryl Gane would have happened to Francis Ngannou by the hands of Jon Jones. I know MMA math doesn't work, but we saw what happened with Francis Ngannou and Jon Jones. If Francis Ngannou can out-wrestle Ciryl Gane for 5 rounds, why in the world would I not think Jon Jones would easily, just as he did, choke Ciryl Gane out? I don't know. The stories don't add up. The things that were being said then don't add up to the things that are being said now. And if Jon Jones would just relinquish that belt, go fight Stipe. Go make another BMF title. I don't know. I mean, whatever belt you want to fight for, because at the end of the day, even they're basically saying to us, they're not fighting for the belt. They're fighting for GOAT things. I don't think there has to be a belt attached to it. To 230, Jon Jones 37, Stipe's over 40 at this point, I'm pretty sure. Stipe hasn't won a fight since, 2019, 2018? I think maybe 2020. The Cormier fight, I think, was after COVID. Jon Jones has fought once in, 4 or 5 years? And I mean, if you really want to get deep into it personally, I think Jon Jones' whole career looks a little funny in the light. When you start throwing out failed drug tests, start throwing out the story of hiding under the cage, which, and the dirty tactics are the dirty tactics, but I mean, plain and simple, I mean, Jon Jones made a career out of poking people in the eyes. There's a rabbit hole to go down that I don't think Jon Jones is even really on the Mount Rushmore of MMA, if we're being completely honest. I mean, and that, I'm sure, is a wild take to most fans, but when you really look into it, I mean, all he did was really clear out the too old to go fighters of the last generation at light heavyweight, really what he built his name on. Like, going back and looking at it, just as I was talking about the monsters of divisions now, where it's like Medina can't survive in a middleweight division anymore. He needs to move down to 170. Just like Damian Maia, he never had any business being at 185. He should have been at 170 all along. That showed, later on in his career. So you're looking at where basically Jon Jones beat a bunch of middleweights, before there was really these gigantic light heavyweights. And I'm not trying to necessarily disparage Jon Jones's accomplishments with just that of these guys were, undersized on their way out. He did beat world champion after world champion. Absolutely. But I almost see it in the same light as I see Izzy's at this point, where it's like, did you do it long enough, really? And then so many questionable things after that, because really, when you look at Jon Jones' legacy, all you really have is that initial run. That's it. After that, what do you really claim of just, there was no more dominating performances. After the second Cormier fight that, failed a drug test, so it doesn't count anyways, there's really not been another amazing Jon Jones performance, besides the Cyril Gane fight, who apparently was the best heavyweight in the world after losing to the champ, and the champ leaves, almost knocks out the heavyweight champion boxer. It's just kind of crazy. You go back to the Oven St. Preux fight. He popped in that fight. Lackluster performance, 5 rounds, coasted to a decision win. The string of Anthony Smith, the fact that Anthony Smith wasn't a finish is insane. How do you not finish Anthony Smith? Finished Gustafsson because of an injury. I want to say it was like his groin or something to that effect. There was some injury that happened in the middle of the fight. I'd argue he didn't beat Dominic Reyes. And Thiago Santos gave him fits, who ended up having 2 blown out knees by the end of the fight that you could almost argue he won the fight too. Personally, I want to go back and watch these fights again just to refresh my memory on them, but what is this amazing legacy? Yeah, he's undefeated and, undefeated again, air quotes again, because, Jon Jones broke the rules and he got disqualified. That's a loss. And I know that Jon Jones and Dana White and, whatever want to try to fulfill this undefeated or whatever, go back and take it off because the 12-6 elbows are going to be, available to throw now. They're not going to be illegal strikes anymore. But the fact of the matter is Jon Jones threw an illegal strike, which caused a finish to the fight. Therefore, it's a disqualification. Somebody was on their knees in the middle of getting up and somebody blasted him with a head kick. Would we be going back and saying, well, he was almost up, he should be undefeated? That's not right. No, we wouldn't say that. So I don't understand why that applies in the Jon Jones situation. That's always thrown me off because, you committed a foul. You ended the fight with a foul. That's a disqualification. It is what it is. I don't know. I don't understand that argument. I'm going to get off this soapbox about the Jon Jones situation, though, because at the end of the day, really what I wanted to get to was just the fact of, kind of just showing, like, the difference in how we're talking about this now versus how we were talking about this, 3 years ago-ish. Completely different story from Dana White, from Jon Jones. The fact of the matter, Jon Jones ducked Francis Ngannou. Didn't have to fight him. Fought a falling off contender in Cyril Gane, who had just lost to Francis Ngannou, had a blown out knee, and still showed up to fight. Meanwhile, Jon Jones was MIA. The moment Ngannou's gone, Jon Jones leaps to fight anybody he can to just throw a belt on him. And now he's gatekeeping the heavyweight belt from Tom Aspinall, who, how many times has he fought in the last year or so? And the fact of the matter that Jon Jones really tried to come out and say, I think it just goes to show, like, And, maybe they get in the cage and Jon Jones destroys Tom Aspinall, because I'm not against thinking that may happen. Jon Jones is a great fighter. No matter everything that I'm saying, preface that with, Jon Jones is an amazing fighter. But I do think Jon Jones is a little insecure about the Tom Aspinall situation. Whether it's because of Tom Aspinall, because of the way the fans are viewing it, or what it is. And him and Dana White are trying so hard to spin that narrative. It's so hard. But it's just not working for most of us. The fact of the matter, let the belt go. Let Aspinall be the undisputed champ. You fight Stipe and then make that for an interim belt. Who the hell cares at that point? And then have Jon Jones Aspinall. Let's see if all of us are correct, or Jon Jones is just playing a long game. I don't know. We'll see. Like I said, that's all for me on this topic, because I don't want to get too far into it, because I feel like I could go down a rabbit hole and talk for 45 minutes on that situation. It's a crazy situation, I think, in the world of MMA, but something I felt like I finally wanted to kind of delve out and talk about on the pod, but I digress. So, all right, so next up, and what we're going to end the podcast on, is we're going to talk some rankings. We're going to talk quarterback rankings. It's always fun, and I'm excited to get into this and kind of hash this out and kind of give you where my brain space is on everybody in the division or in the NFL, as we're going to go one by one through these tiers. And I'm going to start off just with the rookie class. I kind of just gave them their own tier. It's kind of how this tier list was already set up, and I did kind of like that idea where I was just going to rank them kind of on their own, because personally, I don't know, the 1 through 32 rankings that I've looked at and read, some of them are insane. I don't see how Caleb Williams really is even in the top 15, and I'm pretty high on Caleb Williams personally. I just drafted Caleb Williams in my dynasty draft over the weekend. I paid a pretty hefty penny to get up to him, as I already drafted Marvin Harrison. So I think your boy had a pretty good, fairly successful dynasty draft. We'll see how it goes. Those things will play themselves out. But starting with the rookies. Number 1, Caleb Williams. Number 2, Jaden Daniels. Bo Nix, 3. Drake May, 4. And I left McCarthy off of it, even though he was there, just because of the injury. And, we'll see what comes of that. But I did leave him kind of off of this list. And we'll get into the next list. Obviously, Sam Darnold is going to be the quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings, which they are in a fascinating situation, to say the least. But Caleb Williams, the film that I've seen on him, absolutely amazing so far. I mean, obviously, we're going to have to see it in a real game. He has the most weapons by far, with Keenan Allen coming in, drafting Rome Odunze, having why can I not think of DJ Moore? Having DJ Moore there already. Cole Kmet, I think, is a solid tight end right there. I just think Caleb Williams, I mean, if anyone is going to have success this year out of this rookie class, is going to be Caleb Williams. And if he doesn't, I'm going to be worried as a dynasty fantasy player and having Caleb Williams on my roster. Now, Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix. This was one where I was really I couldn't make up my mind, because now I haven't really looked at too much of the preseason film from either one of these guys. But just the way that Bo Nix is trending, I almost want to say Bo Nix. But then at the same time, I also don't want to jump into that wagon of where the media's at with it and kind of pushing Bo Nix, because there was a moment where I was watching a video of somebody, showing some articles and things like that of just, Bo Nix, and I just thought in my head, there's no way this is going to work. They're already all in, sold on him, and as a Chiefs fan, I think we all know about a little bit too much about being all in on either a rookie QB, a QB that's unproven, coming over from somewhere else. I'm looking at you, Matt Castle. I'm looking at you, Brody Croyle. The saviors of the kingdom, right? Until Mahomes came along and changed everything. But I'm still going Jaden Daniels. I think the talent there is more than Bo Nix. And with what they both have to work with, which I don't think is much, you've got the skeleton of Eckler in Washington for the Commanders, and with the Broncos, honestly, I mean, I know Tim Patrick's still there. I don't know if I could tell you anybody off the top of my head really in Denver, which, don't come at me, Denver Broncos fans, like Bills Mafia did for that one. There's just a lot of Jags running around out there. And then Drake May, I have watched a little bit of film on him, and I don't love what I see. So I've got Drake May rounding this out with the rookies. So we got Caleb Williams, number 1, Jaden Daniels, number 2, Bo Nix, number 3, and Drake May at number 4. That's going to round out the rookie tier. Next up, what we have is maybe the most fun tier out of this. And I labeled it as 3 question marks, as you can see. And you have, starting off with Russell Wilson, Derek Carr, Minshew, Watson, Jones, Levis, Young, Darnold. This one was tricky for me. I gave Russell Wilson really just the benefit of the doubt here, and I put him at the 1. I kind of I'm not necessarily ranking them quarterbacks 1 through 32 in this list. I'm more so giving them a tier and then kind of ranking them in their tier where I believe they're, kind of at. I don't necessarily believe Wilson or Carr will finish the season as starters. Spencer Rattler's looked pretty good in the preseason, and I'm just mainly interested to see, because I also think there's a little bit with Spencer Rattler of maybe a chip on his shoulder, because Caleb Williams' number 1 overall pick is the guy that took his job originally that made him transfer from Oklahoma. So I feel like there may be a little bit of, just a little chip on his shoulder to maybe break through that threshold a little quicker than anyone expects. Of course, he was taken in the 5th round. And Derek Carr, look, going back to my personal dynasty league, I traded Chris Olave over the offseason for some draft picks, which may have been insane. But for me personally, from what I, read around the league and things like that, of how Carr and Olave don't have a good relationship. And I felt like even watching some Saints games last year, like, my man, he is open over there. Throw the ball to Olave. Like, I don't know what's going on in New Orleans, but it just don't feel right. It is really how it sits with me. And I feel like Derek Carr has really kind of run his course in the league. And, I was behind Derek Carr when he was in Oakland, honestly. I mean, obviously I'm a Chiefs fan, so whatever, with the Raiders. But I did like Derek Carr, and I did think that Derek Carr was a solid quarterback and was going to be much more than what he was. I think the Josh McDaniels situation kind of ruined his career to a point. He never really, was on that level necessarily, I don't think, of being, getting to that threshold of the top tier. So I gave him number 2 just because we'll see. I don't think that he's going to last. And, compared to the rest of the guys in this group, Minshew, personally, I like Minshew. I think that was the right choice to go with him as the starter this year. And I think that he could be something for the Raiders. I'm very interested to see how the Raiders pan out of the one team that kind of needed a quarterback, didn't go out and try to get one. They didn't have a placeholder in place. They didn't have anybody, really. They had Aiden O'Connell, who was not good last year. And then they brought in Minshew. So, I thought Minshew was the right choice the whole time. Deshaun Watson, I have no idea. Who is this guy? That is my main question, because it's not the Deshaun Watson we saw in Houston whatsoever. He has not been able to find any success. And the fact that Flacco came on last year and was able to find a little bit of success with that Browns team, it's now or never, I think. He got the contract, he got all that guaranteed money, and maybe he's just playing it out. It is what it is. But I just think, when you look at the rankings, the fact that, I put him one spot ahead of Daniel Jones, I think it says a lot. Because then you got Daniel Jones that I think we all kind of feel the same way about Danny Dimes. We'll see. I think the writing's on the wall, though. The Giants are going to have to find a quarterback in the next year or two. But I do like the prospect of Malik Neighbors coming in, maybe helping out Daniel Jones, be a little bit better, just a little bit. Will Levis is next. Personally, I do like Will Levis's game, the arm that he's got, and so I did put him over Young and Darnold. And really, Bryce Young I just put over Darnold just because I'm iffy on Darnold. We'll see if these years as being a backup and kind of moving around in the league propels him, but the Vikings are just a weird team. He's got obviously great receivers. So, I don't know. It'll be an interesting year between those two, but I felt like almost the last 3 were kind of interchangeable. Personally, I just like Will Levis's game a little bit. I think the arm strength is there. I think potentially he could be move up this list tier-wise. Essentially, I think he has the potential to move up. I don't think he's going to be an elite quarterback in this league, but I do think he can kind of be a middle-of-the-pack kind of guy and produce something, but we'll just see what happens with that. But that's going to round out our 3 question mark tier. Going Wilson, Carr, Minshew, Watson, Jones, Levis, Young, Darnold, in that order. And, that's where I felt these guys were at right now. Next, jumping into Tier 3, Part 2. So I think this will make more sense once I get to the regular Tier 3. But I just felt like Tier 3 needed to be broken up into 2 parts because I didn't want to just throw everybody in one tier. But I felt like there was a little bit of a distinction between who I was putting on Tier 3 and Tier 3 Part 2, but I didn't necessarily think they were in with the tier. I could have changed up the list a little bit, but I just felt like Tier 3 Part 2 fit this group the best, and that being first Matt Stafford as a guy that, he's getting up there in age. I do still believe in Matt Stafford's abilities. He's got some good receivers around him. We'll see what that LA Rams offense can be this year with McVay and, a team that was kind of quiet last year, and I still think could be a playoff team in 2024. And I do think as long as Stafford stays healthy, I think out of all of these guys, which, may be kind of crazy with Hurts there, Purdy as well. We'll get into those of how my thought process went through this. But I feel like Stafford is definitely right now heading into 2024 at this current moment. I may look back in 2 months and me say, what the hell was I thinking? But I think Stafford is clear-cut kind of the guy above all of these other guys. Now, my next one goes to Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts, to me, is in the same boat as Brock Purdy and Jared Goff, to a point. The reason I put him ahead of Rodgers is because I do still believe in Jalen Hurts' all-around ability. He can scramble a lot better than a Purdy or a Goff. Granted, he had 15 rushing touchdowns, most of them for probably 5 yards or less. With the push play, which ties into Josh Allen, which is another reason why I had Hurts lower. But I had to take into the context of Josh Allen and perception, because for some reason, Josh Allen's 15 rushing touchdowns were much more impressive than Jalen Hurts' 15 rushing touchdowns, which is fascinating because I think it was 11 out of 15 of Josh Allen's rushing touchdowns came within 5 or 10 yards or less. 10 of them for sure came within like the 2-yard line or less. They were push plays. It's the same thing. So why is Josh Allen's running prowess being, I don't know. I just don't get it. Or even to compare him with Lamar. We're going to get into that in a minute. But like Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen are the same guy running the football, just Jalen Hurts had more rushing yards. Now, they're definitely not the same guy throwing the football, although they're fairly similar, and Josh Allen turns the ball over more. So taking that into context is how Jalen Hurts got this spot at number 2 behind Stafford on this list. Then I go to Rodgers. Rodgers, I think that kind of explains himself. The reason he is where he is obviously the injuries. He has plenty of talent around him. I don't know if Aaron Rodgers will be the same Aaron Rodgers, so I kind of put him in this mix of this Tier 3 Part 2 just because I think he's still in the mix with the elite of the league, but I don't want to put him ahead of some of these guys out here. Brock Purdy is the next one. Brock Purdy, Jared Goff, Kirk Cousins. More so Purdy and Goff. Purdy and Goff, I think, are the same quarterback. Like, the more I think about it, they might be the same quarterback. Honestly, because we haven't seen Purdy in a situation without everything being catered to him, right? That offense is catered to Purdy, made easy for Purdy, has elite weapons for Purdy to succeed. I think a lot of quarterbacks could succeed in that situation that have the mindset of a Brock Purdy and a Jared Goff. Jared Goff, the same kind of way. He was put in a good position in LA. They didn't believe in him. Stafford comes and wins a championship, but now he's put in a situation where they do believe in him. He has elite weapons around him, and Jared Goff has looked good. Jared Goff has looked very good. And Kirk Cousins kind of rounds out this tier basically for the same reason of Aaron Rodgers. I still think that he can be kind of mid-elite, you know what I mean? Like good enough to be a solid starter in the league, but I don't think he's going to raise up to 3 or 2. I think his kind of ceiling is maybe being the leader of this tier, essentially. So tier 3, part 2, got Matt Stafford, Jalen Hurts, Aaron Rodgers, Brock Purdy, Jared Goff, and Kirk Cousins. And now to the bulk of tier 3. This one's going to be a fun one. Tier 3, Joe Burrow, Dak Prescott, Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence, Tua Tagovailoa, CJ Stroud, Jordan Love. I might catch some flack for the last two and being ranked where they are. But both of them, I don't think we've seen enough to necessarily put them yet in front of any of these other guys, and why I kind of put them there. Tua and Trevor Lawrence, to me, are almost interchangeable, but then I kind of went back to, like, with Tua, how much of it is Tua? And you could say that about any of these quarterbacks, but just, I don't know. I just feel like Tua's kind of being carried by that receiving core, and I mean, you could say that for a lot of guys. You know, they're getting carried by the rest of their offense. I mean, it's a team sport. We're ranking one position in a team sport. So I'm trying not to put too much of that in there, and that's kind of where Tua stays. But I feel like, or why Tua is where he is. But I feel like, personally, if you were to ask me, final drive of a playoff game, am I taking Herbert, Lawrence, Tagovailoa, all have the same offense, all have the same coach? I'm probably taking Herbert and Lawrence both over Tua. It just is what it is. Now, with Dak being where he's at, because right here, if you're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Dak is number 5 on my list right now. And that one also might be a little crazy, but I don't think you can take away what he's done in the regular season. I might take all of these quarterbacks over Dak if we're talking about the playoffs, final drive of the playoffs, in a playoff game, and everybody has the same offense and coaching staff to work with. I'm not taking Dak. I mean, that's been proven. But I also can't just look the other way at the body of work that Dak has put up. And now you got the two guys at the end, CJ Stroud and Jordan Love, that are on the heels of, I think, the other 4 guys at least. Burrow's a special situation, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. But Stroud and Love are both right there. They have one more good season, and I'm looking at this in a different way of like, Stroud and Love might be ahead of all these guys in this tier. We'll see. We'll see. I'm very excited for both of them this season just to see what they put out there. But I'm also not ready to put them ahead of any of these guys that have really been established in the top of this game in the last few years. I'm just not ready to put Stroud or Love above a Tua, Trevor Lawrence, Herbert, or a Dak Prescott. I mean, we'll see how that shapes out this season. And I'm very excited. I'm excited to go back to this and, listen to my thoughts on all this. Joe Burrow. We have 2 tiers left. And, I mean, obviously Mahomes is his own tier. I mean, if you came to this video or this podcast thinking this Chiefs fan here was going to have Mahomes in with the likes of any of these other quarterbacks, no. We have a whole tier that's intentionally left blank to show the separation of Mahomes and the rest of this league, because there's no one on the same tier or level as Patrick Mahomes. Nor are they very close, I don't think. Joe Burrow is tier 3. I gave him number 1 on tier 3 for the simple fact that he is not on the same level as Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen at this point. There is absolutely a big 3 of the NFL right now. That is Mahomes, Jackson, Allen. Joe Burrow is not in that conversation anymore. Joe Burrow has played 50% of his career. Joe Burrow needs to prove he can stay healthy. If Joe Burrow can stay healthy, now I will say Joe Burrow is the most technically sound quarterback in the league, I do think. I think Joe Burrow has maybe the best pocket presence, some of the best footwork in the pocket in the league. He does it and makes it look easy. But if you can't play, if you're hurt all the time, I just can't put you in the same tier as these guys that we talked about as MVPs last year. While Joe Burrow was sitting at home and his backup was putting up similar numbers to him. And Burrow's another one of a case where he's absolutely getting carried by these receivers he has. the offensive weapons that the Cincinnati Bengals have absolutely elevated Joe Burrow. And that's not taken away from Joe Burrow is great when he plays. But there's no way you can put him on the same tier as a Lamar Jackson or a Josh Allen when who knows if he'll be playing in November. Will Joe Burrow be playing in December? Do the Bengals even make it out of that division? That's a tough division. These are all real questions. So, tier 3, Joe Burrow, Dak Prescott, Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence, Tua Tagovailoa, C.J. Stroud, and Jordan Love round out tier 3. Tier 2, here we go. This one's going to be a fun one too. And this is going to be my last tier, and we'll round this podcast out. Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen. That is tier 2. You have a tier that is left blank in the middle, and then you have Mahomes at the top. This tier is Lamar Jackson 1, Josh Allen 2. The argument that I've seen for Josh Allen to maybe be the best quarterback in the league, maybe be at least number 2 behind Mahomes, is absolutely asinine. Josh Allen is not on Lamar Jackson's level. Josh Allen is not on Patrick Mahomes' level. You have got to be kidding me with that. Like, the more that I look into it, and I got something else coming out at some point in the next couple of weeks about Josh Allen, because the farce of Josh Allen is so fascinating to me at this point. The engagement I've had with Bills Mafia has absolutely took me to research and look into, just different things. And like I talked about with the Jalen Hurts thing. Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen, same thing. The only thing, rushing-wise, their passing stats aren't that far off either. But rushing-wise, you're taking less turnovers and more yards with the same amount of touchdowns with Jalen Hurts. Now, you tell me, was Jalen Hurts an MVP candidate last year? Like, by the end of it? Because we're still acting like Josh Allen was. And I don't understand that. You cannot turn the ball over the way Josh Allen did. Josh Allen is free with the football. Lamar Jackson has his turnover issues, but it is nothing compared to Josh Allen. And the whole argument is football is only about scoring touchdowns. Well, you know what? You missed one big part of the game, and that's not getting scored touchdowns against you. And I think I've went on a couple of tangents enough. Last week I did the same thing about the Josh Allen situation, because this is when this engagement kind of happened with Bills Mafia that led me down this rabbit hole of just the Josh Allen situation, because it's fascinating. Because, one, Josh Allen can't handle pressure. Josh Allen is one of the worst quarterbacks under pressure in the league. That PFF grade is abysmal under pressure. And night and day from, I don't have it in front of me right now, but it's something like when the pocket's kept clean, Josh Allen has like a 94 grade. When Josh Allen is under pressure, it's like 40-something. That's terrible. There's no way that Josh Allen is better than Lamar Jackson right now. I mean, that's just facts. I will give Josh Allen number 3 in this league all day right now, because I would trust Josh Allen in a playoff situation. Now, I will say Josh Allen is much better in the playoffs. With the turnovers, under pressure even, I think his grade under pressure in the playoffs is like around a 70. But then you also look at these other elite quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes that raise that from a regular season 70 to like a low 90s under pressure in the playoffs. Not the same. And not even Lamar Jackson. It's not the same. Under pressure, Josh Allen is not good, especially in the regular season. And, all of these things are said about all of these quarterbacks is Lamar Jackson's had a great defense. Josh Allen has had a damn near top 10 defense his whole career. Patrick Mahomes got carried by his defense. Again, Patrick Mahomes just now got an elite defense. The receivers. Lamar Jackson ain't really had a receiver to throw to in his entire career. Meanwhile, Josh Allen wasted Stefon Diggs. Patrick Mahomes. Okay. Travis Kelce. Tyreek Hill in the beginning. What has Patrick Mahomes had in the last 2 years where he's coming off of back-to-back Super Bowl wins? There is no argument you can make to say Josh Allen is over either one of these two guys. at 1 or 2 right now. And I don't understand how it's not a consensus around the league. Because, again, to me, in my personal opinion, you have 3 elite quarterbacks right now, hands down. There is a big 3 hierarchy. It easily goes Patrick Mahomes, number 1, Lamar Jackson, number 2, Josh Allen is number 3. And I don't think it's particularly close between either one of them. It may be closer between Jackson and Allen. But I still think that Jackson's pretty solid above Josh Allen. Bigger plays, more rushing yards. Maybe you got less rushing touchdowns, and insanely better touchdown to interception ratio. Lamar Jackson might be better than Josh Allen at throwing the football. Like, let's talk about that, because that's the knock on Lamar Jackson, right? He can't throw the football. But the guy that you're trying to tell me is better than Lamar Jackson, has worse stats than Lamar Jackson throwing the football, and we want to cling on to touchdowns? When you got a guy that's turned the ball over 75 times since 2020? Get out of here. That's not how that works. So with that, these are my tiers. This is my quarterback ranking list going into the season. I hope you enjoyed it. Got a little passionate there at the end. I plan to add some more passion to it next week. I'm hoping, I got my fingers crossed, to have Ray and EDJ on the podcast next week, and we're going to have this debate. And if you know, you know. I want to say it was episode 26 of the Schrobank Show. This was way back in 2019, towards the beginning of all of this. EDJ, Rated R Randy, Ray, and myself were all on that podcast talking about Lamar Jackson and, you know, the difference between these top-tier quarterbacks in the league at that time. So I'm going to link that in the description below to get you hyped up for next week, because if all goes well, they both get on the podcast, it's going to be awesome. Like, it's going to be button heads, and we're going to be going back and forth. I'm really excited for it. And so, again, crossing my fingers that goes down and that happens. Make sure you smash that subscribe button. On the road to 300 before that first game. Of course, we're just a week and a half away now from Baltimore Ravens at the Kansas City Chiefs opening night. Make sure you smash that like button, too, if you watch until the end. I really do appreciate it. That's awesome. And let me know what you think. What do your tier lists look like? And who do you have in your top 5 quarterback rankings? And Bills Mafia, go ahead, smash that comment section, because I already know I've seen all the discourse. Shout out to y'all. Y'all are great, but also delusional. So until next time, we'll see you in the next podcast.